is All Elite Wrestling, AEW Unrestricted, the official podcast of All Elite Wrestling. And I'm Will Washington, and there's Aubrey Edwards, and I want to talk to her about something here in just a second. But I want to remind everybody, before we get to that this podcast is presented by Upper Deck and the AEW SP Signature Edition. It is here. It is featuring Mercedes Moné, Orange Cassidy, Kenny Omega, and much more. Speaking of Kenny Omega, but it's packed with rare hits, stunning parallels, and collector heat. This set delivers the energy of the ring straight to your hands. It's available at your local hobby store. Do not miss the pull of the year. I mean, these cards are fantastic. I love these SP Signature cards. And look at that. We got Kenny Omega right here. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous card. You look at that right here.
Yeah, I don't have any Kenny Omega cards, which is probably for the best because I don't know.
Look, Kenny didn't really do anything here.
Kenny didn't do anything wrong. Let's be clear.
Right,
Kenny didn't do anything wrong.
We have to talk about this because you, my friend, how are you feeling? Because you took V-Trigger last week on Dynamite.
Okay, so I felt fine initially. Like Thursday, I was like, okay, I'm not as sore as I thought I would be. And then, you know, like when you do like a really hard leg day and then 2 days later, like you can't even move. So I woke up Friday and it just felt like a train had hit the whole left side of my body. And my husband's like, yeah, a train called Kenny Omega. Like,
yeah.
And I was trying to describe it to like my friends, like how crazy this was and how like this isn't something that happens often. And then like of course, all of my friends, we have a Slack. And then my husband's like, no, you people don't understand. Like the V-Trigger is one of the most intense moves in professional wrestling. Like, and then other friends start posting like video compilations of it. And everyone's like, oh, this is bad. I'm like, yeah. But I think most of all, I'm just really like, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, which is like the worst thing that like any woman can say, right? In Swerve, like my fellow Washington bro, I thought we were cool. And just how dare you? I thought you were a different person. I don't know why I did. The whole music says, you know, most dangerous. We even had a warning.
Yeah, and I mean, like it was definitely in question, at least watching it initially, where it's like, oh, did she like fall in the way of that? And it's like you watching, you're like, oh no, she got pulled.
I definitely got pulled. For the record, he pulled me very hard into a very hard V-Trigger. So the whole day was a little like.
You are such a trooper, though, and
I'm alive. I survived.
I mean, look, that they say that being a referee is a hazardous job, and you are in the line of fire of multiple men who weigh anywhere between 200 and 250 pounds. And
right? Like significantly more than me. I like to think I'm like a tough broad, but here and there, I ain't no superhero. but we do have some villains in this ring, right? And I don't know. I think just simply saying that is a good segue. So Will, who's our guest today?
Aubrey, he is the mind behind major DC comic titles like Wonder Woman and the Justice League of America, and now he can add the AEW DC 2 comic crossover to his incredible resume. Please welcome DC Comics' own Steve Orlando. Steve, thanks for being here on AEW Unrestricted.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk. This is a dream project, as everyone at DC knows. You'll find out when this came down the pipe. I don't think there was anybody else's name that was on their mind, so I'm very excited to talk about it.
Well, I guess we'll start with the easy question then. How early on did you get involved in building this project?
So the shape of it took shape over a couple of years, right? So the answer is actually perhaps earlier than folks might think. Because this came from, about, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm getting old now. We did the origin shorts that we debuted at San Diego Comic-Con and for a variety of AEW wrestlers. And we had that project itself began probably 2 or 3 years before that. So at least 5 years ago of knowing that there was going to be something, but not knowing what it was. And then we did the shorts and they were extremely well received, at least in the comic side. And especially the not unboxing, but unenveloping videos that y'all did. So with that, it then became what's going to be next, and we got talking about it back and forth. And when we finally said, so this was about 2 years, even if about 5 years for AEW Comics, about 2 years for this gig. And the thing was, is it, as soon as we started talking, the story was almost bigger than anybody planned for, right? So it went from, I think, something a little shorter into, then it was 2 issues, and then it was, well, let's see how many pages we can get into each 2 issues. So we were cooking it for a while, but as we got into it and sort of figured who was going to be coming in from the AEW side, who's going to be there from the DC side, it was more like, how much can we get into this? How big can we make it within the constraints of the project? So we were cooking for a while. But it was like a constant yes and now let me tell you, like, the series could probably still be twice as long as it is if we had time, because there's we'll get into it, but like the mashing up the characters that you guys have with DC's characters, the easiest job in the world, right? And we could explore them forever. So like, we were cooking for many, many years, and now it's like, I would love to have an even bigger banquet if we ever could.
Right. And kind of on that topic, like, what do you think makes comics and wrestling like such a natural fit? Because I feel like the 2 circles are there and the Venn diagram is almost like one circle.
Yeah, no, well, I would agree in a lot of ways. I will quickly give love to my friend Mike Kingston, who is a longtime comics and wrestling fan. I wouldn't have done this comic without Mike. We are, well, he was in my wedding party, so we're pretty tight. But years ago, I was that asshole, right, who had watched wrestling as a kid, right? And I became friends with Kingston because he and I grew up in the same town, went to the same college, both working comics. And we would go to lunch every once in a while, and what's Undertaker doing, right? And he would just be like, well, he's not dead yet, asshole, right? So finally, but I wasn't watching, right? I was just being a jackass. And I will say, now, especially because you guys sent him off better than I could ever possibly imagine. Like, I got back in by complete chance in 2015 because I was at Emerald City Comic Con, and in the hotel lobby of my hotel, Sting versus Triple H was playing. And I was like, fuck, I need to get back in, right? So I finally started, the point and how it's germane to this question is, the whole time, Kinger was like, comics and wrestling are not that different. At the end of the day, it's good versus evil inside the ring. It is played out with these wildly colorful characters and costumes, and the setting might be different, right? We're not like saving reality from an antimatter wave, but the storytelling is intensely similar. And of course, for years, I was like, yeah, whatever, dude, I'm just going to go write the fucking Flash. And, but then as I got back in, I started to see everything he was saying. He's like a bald upstate New York Nostradamus, and he was 100% right. And you can see it everywhere now. I think that's why, right? You do have, it is very similar, broadly speaking, these old school moral plays, again, like iconic good versus evil, wild, larger than life characters. And especially with the ring style you guys have, people doing things that seem superhuman. So as I said, like, this is they're flavors that perhaps people who don't know and love each may not think taste great together, but the reality is that they're the chocolate and peanut butter of storytelling. And hopefully folks see that when they pick up the book.
Well, I think that's the piece that I've had the most fun with since I've had my copy and gotten to show everybody. Because for those who like aren't in the middle of the Venn diagram, it's like, I get to show my wrestling fan friends that, like, hey, there's this cool DC crossover. And of course, everybody knows DC Comics, right? And so it's like, oh my God, this is freaking amazing. Getting to see, like, these wrestlers that I know and love with characters that I think everybody knows and loves. And to see it all come together is really cool. But then on the other side of that, I get to show my non-wrestling fan friends who see this and they go, wait, it's now crossed over with professional wrestling. I need to check out professional wrestling. This is cool. And so no matter what, it marries in a way that I think is really awesome for everyone involved. And like when you get to see the artwork and see almost how naturally it all comes together, I think it is probably the best part to me, is how like naturally you look at somebody like Hangman Adam Page and see how like naturally he fits on the page, or see how naturally Swerve Strickland fits on the page, and things like that. Like, I guess to the next question then, like, how collaborative did you get to be with AEW on that side to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, we could always be more, like for the record, but I was very lucky because another thing that is, as you guys know, similar to the wrestling side is that we're frequently on the convention circuit, right? So even though you guys are always moving around, I had the luxury of being oftentimes on a lot of the same shows as folks that were in the book, right? So while there was nothing structured, I there was often like, oh, I'm in the green room and there's Darby, right? And though he may not know me, it's my approach was literally like, hey man, you're teaming up with Batman. Would you like to talk about your character, right? And everybody has said yes, things like that in that setup. So I was pretty lucky in that, like there are a couple instances. As I said, I had just seen Darby, I guess last summer now, because time is just flying. But and we were writing the issue, and I got to say, here's what's going to happen. I'd love to push your character. I'd love to take advantage of what comics can do, right? And one of those things is that no one really does get hurt in comics, other than your artist drawing hand. So and that does happen. That's not even a joke, folks. So
100% believe it. Workplace hazard.
I was like, Darby, what's something? And again, imagine asking this to this specific audience, but I was like, what's one thing you would love to do that you just could never do, right? And let's do it in the book. And now
that's got to be a very difficult question now for Darby Allin,
from a dude that climbed Everest. Like, what kind of answer does he have?
Well, now folks know why he got shot in the head by the Joker in that first issue. So
it's like the one thing we can't do to Darby, and like the amount of things that come out from Darby, and it's like, well, I'd like to get shot in the head.
Oh, it can't be that.
But so to get perspective on how he and that's the joke answer, though that really did happen. But also how he would react to someone like Batman and things like that. How does Darby Allin, the character, react? So we had opportunities like that. We had similarly, I was able to be in a couple panels with Swerve. Honestly, I was excited for him to see this news. Because he may not even remember this, but at GalaxyCon, when we were talking about the origin issues, not this past year, but in 2024, someone in the audience asked him what his dream comics crossover would be, and he said Jon Stewart, Green Lantern. So I was like waiting for the news about this to come out to see that he was going to be getting that, right? So we got to talk a little bit there.
There's not a chance he doesn't remember that, by the way. There's nobody who keeps receipts more than Swerve Strickland.
Well, I'm glad. I was trying to not be a goon about it and be like, oh man, I did it. We did it for you, right? Because I try not to be a complete asshole idiot. But and so there were a couple things like that. And also people like Willow, I used to, I will say without being too much of a goon, I used to see Willow on the indies up here. So she's not hometown to Boston, but it feels
pretty damn close.
It feels like the hometown hero, and I saw her at a St. Patrick's Day show last year at a brewery in Boston, right? So I see her relatively frequently, and there's a chance there, right, to talk about her character with her when you run into her.
And I'm pretty sure Willow cut her teeth in Worcester, Massachusetts. So it's not that.
Worcester is where yes, there's a Fed that runs up there, but she is technically built from Long Island. I don't want to make it but no, so there are people. Yeah, I've been very lucky that a lot of the roster that was picked for the book were folks that either I had known from before they even signed up with you guys, or that I had read. I see a lot of the circuit, and it's always beneficial, right? Because this kind of storytelling, as you said, we do kind of the same thing. One of my favorite panels I've ever been on years ago was also at a convention, and it was a character building panel. And I pushed, because I knew the owner of the show, to make it not just a bunch of comic creators. I think it's more interesting when we can talk interdisciplinary about the same type of thing. So it was actually me talking about character building, and then it was the winner of a show called Cosplay, which is the cosplay version of Drag Race. Which her name was Witchy Brew, and then it was Chris Statlander, and all talking about how we build a character and things like that. And we do a lot of the same thought processes and things, regardless of what the output is. So for something like this, yeah, anytime I could get, and I was lucky to have a fair amount of it to talk to folks about their characters and perspectives, it just goes into the book. And for people, I'll fully come clean. I have never met Toni Storm, for example, but her character is so indelible that it was honestly, I could do an entire miniseries of her and Zatanna. Not hard at all, even though we'd never met, because you know what that character. I mean, you know what Toni Storm is like at Starbucks. You know what Toni Storm is like at the DMV, right? Like, and that's what an
wow, this is such a great conversation, and we're just getting started here on AEW Unrestricted. I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have more with Steve Orlando. Stay tuned. This is AEW Unrestricted.
AEW Unrestricted, Aubrey and Will, and we are talking to Steve Orlando, the mastermind behind the major DC Comics titles like Wonder Woman, Justice League of America, and now he's a huge part of AEW X DC 2-comic crossover. This whole conversation has been awesome so far. And I'm not a comic person. Like, I'll occasionally like read something or watch something and whatnot. It's not something I necessarily seek out, but every time I always enjoy it. And there's so many different characters and there's so much character development that happens. And talking about all the similarities between characters and wrestling and comics and whatnot, how hard was it to narrow down the list of who to include from the AEW roster on this?
Well, like, very hard. I can't even dance around it, like, and I think, and there was some input, I think, from folks on the AEW side, which was helpful, in some ways. I mean, helpful in all ways, but I think in some ways the choices were, influenced by things that I would not have known were coming, for example. Right. So, but yeah, very hard. Right. I mean, it's almost physically painful for me to do this book without Samoa Joe in it. But who knows if he's going to be off, being Sweet Tooth or whatever, right? So like, being voiced by Will Arnett, a skill that I think would be very funny if also happened on live television. But anyway, so
idea, write that down.
You do not want my dumb wrestling ideas, because most of them are based on Shazam. So the comic book character, I will tell you, this is a quick digression that will amuse you. And if you want to talk about the original comic crossover in my mind, I was desperate like 8 years ago when they were both on the indies for Marco Stunt to team up with now Jake Doyle, formerly Jake something, and do a gimmick where Marco would say a magic word like Shazam, there would be a lights out, and then he would just turn into Jake something. And I don't really know either of them. I thought of the smallest person I could think of and the beefiest guy I could think of. Like, and it's just all I want. Of course, in kayfabe, they would be the same person.
I mean, look, I can't necessarily give out too much because of the fact that like some of my stuff shows up on TV from time to time, but I get that because like as a member of the AEW creative team, like there are times where I have literally stolen things from movies. Like literally, I got Harley to do Knifey Spoony from The Simpsons on the AEW television, and I mean,
it's a win.
And that to me is like, I get it. I get the idea where sometimes you, just as a professional wrestling fan, you sit and look at things and go, all right, there's a way I can make this work, and I know I can make it work. And it's definitely a dream to get to see it happen, whether that unfolds in professional wrestling or like you've getting to see things unfold on the page.
For sure. And I will say, like we got the roster and there was one person who was not on the roster, and I very rarely lean in because I am a project pleaser. But I did say, I mean, and like, I was like, if Darby and Batman are in this book, listen, I just got to be honest with you. Like, Sting is going to be in this book, and he was not in the original roster. And I was just like, we're simply not doing it correctly if you have these two characters. So I like, as a slight teaser, you may see a certain vigilante in part 2 of DCAW. Because I was just like, there are, like, I understand accommodating the roster needs, but you simply cannot have Darby and Batman and not have Sting show up. So I picked my one to lean in on. And then I feel like I betrayed all my other favorites, but that's okay.
I mean, look, I this is just me speculating, but like my brain immediately goes to like a Batman Beyond type story there, in pulling elements from, and I know you can't spoil here, but like that's immediately where my brain goes to.
Well, to be clear, if Batman Beyond starred Sting instead of Bruce Wayne, I think that Bruce was Sting's age when he was still like taking back bumps in the middle of the arena, so it would be a much more active show.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's very true.
You know, Sting apparently never gets old, whereas Bruce does. So that in itself provides some plot problems.
There's so many things I'm thinking about now. I'm like, this could totally work.
I think the big thing, and I think that I'm loving and picking up in all of these conversations, is that it's really good to have, you know, we've done a lot of collaborations with AEW, but I think the places where I always get most excited is when I see that the mind involved is not just a wrestling fan, but actively aware of what's happening in the product. And I think that's the piece that I've taken away from this conversation so far that I'm enjoying the most. And so again, talking back to the collaborations, what sort of things were you kind of seeing on television at the time that all this was coming together that kind of were starting to spark pieces of inspiration?
Well, I mean, the big thing is, so this is going to be a weird cut for people who are not comics people, but a goal with this book was that it was, as you said, like it's for comics fans, it's for wrestling fans. But the hope was that at the end of the day, even if you didn't know about wrestling or vice versa, that it was still just going to be a great adventure story, a great, you know, classic comic story. And the inspiration for that for me comes from a book that you've probably never read, because why would you, called Crisis of Infinite Kernels. It is a book that DC put out years ago as a promotional comic that featured, as you might imagine, a variety of Colonel Sander from the multiverse. And it was like kind of a, expected to be a joke book, but it turned out like my friend Tony Bedard wrote it. And it was like, if you somehow didn't know what fried chicken was, this was still just like a great comic book romp, right? And that's the goal with DCAW as well. And the hope was that we could sort of infuse some of the wrestling storytelling and tropes with comic stuff and vice versa. So yes, this is a big like cataclysmic multiversal belt that can rewrite reality. The big Galactic Belt. I mean, there's a lot of Easter eggs for folks who know about the big gold belt. Obviously, you two do. But the hope was that, yeah, we could look at things and sort of infuse them in the comic way. And one of the easiest ways, I would say, is like, I would argue, and obviously I would almost love it if you disagree, but like a lot of characters, I don't think that there are some AW characters often, I think, because they are sort of indelibly themselves and often built off a person's real personality. I would not often say that like heel and face is always as cleanly delineated. I think
Never.
it is often situationally dependent on who they're working, right? Like that, and that's a beautiful thing. Hangman can kind of always be Hangman. But it reflects differently if he's working with someone who is, or feuding with someone who's a bigger piece of shit than him, or vice versa. In character, folks.
Right.
I mean, this is a dude who burned someone's house down. So
Exactly. It's like he's committing
right.
arson, but somehow he's still a baby face. Like it's not just black and white people.
And so it's funny because like everybody was like, well, how can Jon Moxley be with, why isn't he the villain? And I said, well, kind of because like Moxley, like situationally is always Moxley, right? I mean, I watched, and I gotta give you guys props for World's End. I think what appeared to be an organic face turn for Moxley in that match was one of the wildest I'd seen since like Austin Bret Hart. We're going back like 30 years. But the point is he was still like, it's not like anything really changed. He was still being Jon Moxley. Like, so those things made it very easy to keep the characters true to who they were, but fit them in where most of our characters are going to be heroic. And of course, we put him with Guy Gardner, who himself is famous for being an asshole within comics. I mean, Guy will always do the right thing. I mean, if you look at Nathan Fillion's version in the recent movie, like he'll always do the right thing, but he will be an asshole about it. And so, he can match that sort of energy with Moxley. I think we lucked out. I can't say that this thing, I don't know if anybody predicted the what happened at World's End. If you did, God love you. But I didn't. But the point is it fits him even more now. But I kind of felt like he could always be himself, regardless of if he's with a hero or a villain. Same with someone like OC, right? Like he never is too worried about what's happening in this story, but he's going along with the ride. That's a fun note. You asked about the roster. I'm kind of gutted that I couldn't do Harley and Harley.
Mhm.
But we got OC in there as a nice fit, and there are so many dumb jokes between the two of them. But the biggest thing is that, like, I was very happy, and you'll see the book does give love to sort of classic wrestling tropes and things, as I said. And the biggest thing, of course, is Mercedes turning at the end of the first issue, which anyone who is from the wrestling side should not be shocked. But you know, I mean, the minute that happened, I'm going to be fully honest with you. Originally, what happens in issue 1 of this was originally the entire story. But once we latched onto Mercedes isn't actually working with Aquaman, and she's, you know, once we realized that end stinger, the splash of, you know, the whole world's going to say hello to their new CEOs, we were like, fuck, this is like, we got to get here. This is the cliffhanger of the first issue, right? So in that way, like, serving the wrestling of it all, serving the what would Mercedes really do, I mean, completely informed the rest of the story. Everything that happens in issue 2 was either planned for, you know, potential future stuff or not at all. But once we realized that there was no stronger clincher to that first part, especially for this kind of book, than doing the heel turn, right? Like, than doing the dastardly turn, and in doing Injustice Incorporated, I mean, there was no way we couldn't do it, right? And that's all.
It kind of can't, like, it writes itself almost. It's like you have to put a heel turn in a book like this.
You know, like, I mean, ironically, it's only the only reason Moxley didn't bleed, like, when someone looked at him in this comic, is because it's an all ages comic.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I will tell you, and I will put my husband over on this podcast, he sometimes watches wrestling with me, but one of the few things he does know, he's like, wow, it's been 2 minutes and Moxley isn't bleeding.
It's just the universe that this comic exists in just has a commission. That's really the explanation. Like, that's really the secret.
It's like, it's like traveling to
yeah.
New York and Washington State.
Yep, or Pennsylvania, or Maryland, or any of those. That's
Missouri.
This is not what this podcast is about, but I'm going to tell you guys something. So I do. There's no reason you guys would know this, but I also am pretty good friends with Chef Jose Andres from World Central Kitchen. We wrote a book together. We've worked Disaster Relief together, and I desperately wanted to throw for my 40th birthday a charity wrestling event. And it was going to be deathmatch style, but because it was all going to benefit World Central Kitchen, obviously there wouldn't be any real deathmatch stuff. It was going to be food fight, but booked like deathmatch. But I will tell you what got in the way of that. The very thing you're talking about. It was extremely
the New York State Commission.
Anywhere that we could make, because the gag was we were not going to tell Jose what it was, and he was just going to show up and be on commentary. He's never seen pro wrestling before at all.
That would be the best.
So he was just going to sit down so we had to get it in one of the states close to where he lives. And yeah, I was shocked at how much of our draconian situation it was. So sadly, the food fight death match did not happen, but I was looking at planning it for a long time and could not beat the athletic commissions.
Yeah, they're kind of the greatest villain of all, but it just means it's opening it up for other states that you could potentially have this amazing food fight in. So just saying, when it does happen, if you need a ref, let's talk. We are going to take another quick break here on AEW Unrestricted. There's more to talk about with Steve Orlando and the DC AEW crossover coming up after the break. AEW Unrestricted, Aubrey, Will. We are talking to Steve Orlando, the mastermind. I'm going to keep saying mastermind because it sounds very like, I don't know, comic booky. I don't know, the mastermind behind the AEW DC comic crossover. So we've talked a lot about sort of like your involvement in this, and clearly you're a wrestling fan, which is why you were the best person chosen for this. But I'm kind of curious, let's kind of take it back a little bit just so we can kind of get to know you a little bit more. How did you first discover comics, and what was sort of the first book you remember buying where you're like, yeah, I got to do this?
So it's a weird thing. I can tell you the exact first book I ever bought. It was West Coast Avengers 16, which I believe came out in 1987. It was called A Tale of Two Kitties, written by Steve Englehart, art by, I don't remember, I want to say Marshall Rogers, but I don't think that's right, so I apologize. Anyway.
It's okay. The comic book nerds will correct you if it's wrong.
Sure will, and I deserve it. So West Coast Avengers 16, it was Hellcat and Tigra fighting over the Hellcat uniform. They finally come together and heal their social wounds by defeating yet another cat-themed villain, Tiger Shark, by destroying his dorsal fin with their claws. And I guess that was it for me, because it's now, that was almost 40 years ago, and still in. But I got it because my father sold sports memorabilia, and I was not that into sports, right? So when I would be at these flea markets and trade shows and things, card shows, I would always be gravitating towards the non-sports cards and the non-sports memorabilia. And right next to them, of course, were back issues of comics. So, I mean, before I could read, I liked comics. Like the colorful characters and the worlds and all those things. And it's basically been that way ever since. This was, even when I had other jobs, I was that kid. Perhaps you knew someone annoying in like middle school that already knew what they wanted to do, and that was certainly me. I remember one of my best friends to this day in sixth grade. We did an icebreaker, and it was Steve Orlando wants to make comics, and Josh Forward knows how to is a black belt in karate. And I will tell you that 30 plus years later, he is a multi-level black belt still, and I do in fact make comics. But that was me. It's what I always wanted to do.
Well, then I suppose that ultimately answers the question of how did it come to be? But it sounds like it was always destined to be, as far as you were concerned.
Yeah, but also a lot of hustle that is probably similar to breaking into wrestling. It's one of the reasons I have a lot of respect for what y'all do. Of course, we don't have to get punched in the face, but I mean, I had a shoot job for many, many years, and a lot of the people in the indies here now, it's not just Britt Baker that has another job. Like, many people are gym teachers or whatever else during the day. And like, so I did that, man, like for almost 20 years. I first went to a convention trying to break in when I was 12. And I finally started doing this as my like job when I was 29.
That's a commitment. That's quite a bit.
Well, when did Riho start? 14, right? So like
that's true. That's true.
So it is the journey can often be similar. Of course, you guys have to sacrifice much more, your bodies and risk your health and things. But keeping the passion. It is slightly corny, so forgive me. But like first of all, I'm a coward. I could never do what you guys do. But I do understand to an extent what it's like to have this love for this sort of esoteric thing that, to be honest, like most average people in the street will either tell you isn't a job or could never be your job or could never be your career. And I did that for a long time. I was in wine and spirits. My what I studied in college is completely unrelated from writing. I was a Russian studies major. I know like that to keep the drive, as everybody tells you that this can't be a real thing. This could never be what you do for your job and things. Like, I do understand that and having to keep that motivation and to just love this thing that a lot of people don't really get. It's one of the first reasons when I started going to indie shows after I, got over myself in 2015, where I really saw that connection between the two things. Because listen, when you were trying to get into comics, and it's probably very similar. Yeah, I mean, not only do people say you could never do that, but they are also say, do people even still read those things? Does that stuff even still exist? And you're like, not only do they, but it's the best fucking thing in the world, right? So I do have a lot of respect for that.
You could literally replace like the word comics with the word wrestling and everything you just said, and you are 100% correct.
Yeah, I find that all really interesting because, like, especially the last piece you were talking about, because my son, I'm just now getting him into comics because he's been, for the last, 2 years, he just randomly decided to start up the MCU from the beginning, and he got, Marvel obsessed, and now he's, super Marvel obsessed, and then he was, asking me, I started to recommend to him, comic books and things like that, because it's this all comes from somewhere. Everything you love started in a place that is far more imaginative than you could ever possibly dream of. And then I started introducing him to comics. I actually went to R.D. Evans, one of my good co-workers here at AEW, and asked him about his comic book recommendations. He started putting us on to trades, and then that opened a whole world up to my son's. I bought him some Flash trades for Christmas, things like that. And it's that thing you said where sometimes people go comics, is that still a thing? And it's well, of course it is. Not only is it still a thing, but it drives so much of what you're probably already interested in.
Correct.
Oh, without question. I remember years and years ago, I first saw the goofiest version of all of these discussions when I guess it was 2003. Road to Perdition came out. Tom Hanks and other people. Oh, future Superman Tyler Hoechlin plays his son in that. And I was at the mall, and there was this older guy who loved the movie and was heckling this, or haranguing, one might even say. I might go so far as to say haranguing this poor Borders worker because he had seen this movie, he loved Road to Perdition, and he wanted to read the book that it was based on. And when presented with the comic, I was right fucking there. He was like, well, no, that's the kids' version. Which, never mind that you think there's a kids' version of Road to Perdition. But that's the kids' version. And this poor motherfucker ended up, he refused to buy anything except the novelization of the movie that was based on the comic. Because and I was just like, yeah, like, so yeah, people, I'm never surprised that even people who watch like the DC and Marvel movies are like, damn, those come from comics. Yes, they in fact do.
Yes, it's the same comics that you think about that only kids read. It's like, no, those are actually something that like is a huge deal that a lot of people love, that a lot of people pour their like blood, sweat, and tears into, as you do yourself. Like, you've made a living doing this.
Look at how popular Walking Dead was, and like I think a good chunk of the audience didn't realize where that was born, and that's like,
I didn't until this very moment. So there you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Steve, I'm kind of curious because you clearly have such a fondness for wrestling and an understanding of how the live events and the character construction, all this sort of works, and then putting wrestlers into comics. What is sort of something that wrestling does really well that comics could maybe learn from?
Oh, I mean, I say this to the powers that be all the time. It is not devaluing your villains. And this is a real thing, right? Like, and I'm not the only wrestling fan in comics. We're legion. I promise you. Imagine. Even if I'm the loudest of them all. And I remember, I think I used to talk, especially my first era at DC, talk about wrestling booking all the time in regards to some of your iconic villains, right? And I'm interested in your takes on it as well, because, commonly, we would say, like, for example, Mongol. And I'll do the Cliff Notes version for context. But Mongol in the 1980s became super famous because he put this plant on Superman called the Black Mercy that made him imagine his perfect dream existence. And eventually Superman, for his birthday, he basically wanted to fuck with him for his birthday. And so slowly Superman realizes that this perfect heavenly existence is fake, and he has to rip himself out of it, and he comes back to reality. And at the end of it, Mongol says, happy birthday, Kryptonian. Here's my gift. I give you oblivion. And all Superman says is burn, and then like sets him on fire with his heat vision, which was very uncommon for Superman in the 80s. And so for many, many years, because Mongol got Superman so well, and that was so iconic, it was like, fuck, Mongol's here. This is a serious story. Like, something real is going to happen. And then he got beaten, and then he got beaten. And then his son, whose name was also Mongol, got beaten. And then his daughter, whose name was Mongale, also got beaten. And also blown up in the James Gunn movie. So, and we would say, like, there were a school of thought that every time Mongol is there, it's automatically auspicious. And we would say, no, it was like, I mean, with no offense intended, it was auspicious 30 years ago. Now this dude has lost. And it's very similar to, like, people have to win, and you could get him back, right? In the same way that you can get back a wrestling heel or a monster back, right? But we talked about that kind of thing all the time. Like, eventually, like, villains they can't, with a couple exceptions, like, villains have to score some wins, or the threat won't be there, or it'll be, like, there. It's different when Parasite, who I love as well, shows up to fight Superman than Zod, because Zod is the guy that Superman had to kill once. In Parasite, to be frank, is a lovable jobber at this point. So, and I love him for fans of Rudy Jones. But that is something we bring up a lot, right? And it can be done, like, I can't think of a great example that from AEW, but like, Well, I mean, yeah, like who's someone that lost recently that got that fire back immediately? I mean, you could even look. Well, actually, no, I can think of a great example. Swerve. I mean, Swerve lost his feud with Hangman after his house got burned
Right.
down. But within a month, he was back doing even wilder shit, and you were like, it didn't matter, right? You know, like the threat was still there. So people can lose, but they have to do things, memorable things, to regain the. Well, I guess the youth would say the riz, you know, like or the aura, right? But to get their heat back. And we run that up the chain all the time. Like, and there are exceptions, by the way. And I'm interested if you think there are people in wrestling who are like this, but the most obvious one is the Joker. The Joker can lose forever. And every time he shows up, it's always auspicious. I think that's relatively rare in wrestling because
we call that person a good hand.
You know, but I mean, God rest him, but I think there was an aura, a little bit of that aura to someone like Bray Wyatt, even though he wasn't AW. And that was like the strength of the character, right? Like you could still, but it's hard. It's obviously much easier to sell menace when you know they're going to kick the shit out of whoever they're talking about.
Man, this has been such an excellent conversation, and it's one of those conversations where I wish we could just continue to talk comics and wrestling forever. But you know, there's always time for another conversation. And Steve, I want to thank you for being here on AEW Unrestricted. You can follow Steve on Instagram at the.steve.orlando. And of course, the crossover issue, AEW x DC issue 1, is officially available at your favorite comic book stores and online retailers. Get your copy today. And AEW Unrestricted, this podcast right here, is sponsored in part by Upper Deck, and the AEW SP Signature Edition is here. It's featuring Mercedes Moné, Orange Cassidy, Kenny Omega, and more. It's packed with rare hits, stunning parallels, and collector heat. This set delivers the energy of the ring straight to your hands, available at your local hobby store. Do not miss the pull of the year, and you can please rate, follow, and review AEW Unrestricted wherever you get your podcasts, including the AEW YouTube channel where you can see these mugs here. And yes, and make sure that you check these out every Monday to watch the video editions. And of course, the audio is available every Thursday. And if you're not an AEW insider, what are you doing? You can get early access to ticket pre-sales, special merchandise offers, and more straight to your inbox. Sign up today at AEWTix.com. And of course, AEW Dynamite is on TBS Wednesdays at 8 p.m. and streaming on HBO Max. AEW Collision is live every Saturday on TNT and also streaming on HBO Max. ROH streams every Thursday on Honor Club. I'm Will Washington. She is Aubrey Edwards. We'll see you next time. Have a great day. Peace.